Hey, what's going on, guys? It's me, Train Man, and welcome back to the Zombie Train episode 195. This episode involves me fixing assets in Tane, as of course it does, and it's actually given me a lot of confidence, as a matter of fact, because I feel like we are actually very, very close to being done. We are very close to basically... I think almost everything is fixed except for the things that are a little bit beyond my comprehension so far. Which means that there are some... Okay, here's the thing that's badgering me. There's a passenger asset that is Tane. That is in Tane, rather. That is... I said it is Tane because it comes with Tane. It's a Tane asset. It has also came with some other earlier... DLCs, like the PRRT1, I think. But it does not, it did not, rather, it is not properly obsoleting the original files. It is not saying to the original files, hey, you do not need to exist anymore, I'm in charge. And the old files are something that not only can I not get a handle on, they're, not only can I not get a hold of them, when I do, I have to pull them out and put them back in, and then they are broken. So they are something that either I'm going to have to teach Tane how to do this properly, or I am just going to have to manage to figure out how to fix these assets and actually just make up one of my own, which is going to be problematic. Anyways, I am talking a lot about what I have to do in this episode here, because the question itself is something I'm not really sure I can shed a hell of a lot of insight into. By the way, what we are doing here primarily, again, is either I try to revert everything modified to original. The things that were not responding to that I have to delete and replace. And those are the things with the broken alpha textures and stuff like that. I'm not going to go through and tear out all of the modified files. I'm only going to do it for things that aren't working properly. And these seem to be pretty much the only things. Anyways, so... let me get the original wording of this comment, as I typically do, because Zombie Train, because I'm wondering if there was more to it than what the little bit that I'm seeing in this comment here. So, no, pause that. So, where is it? Oh, Devin Baker, here you go. What about 844 do you have any use for that? Okay, so let me start off by saying I find these single engine questions a little bit interesting, but there's not a lot of material I can put behind them because, well, from an in-universe point of view, I never had access to all of the paperwork, and I didn't ride behind all of the engines, and, there was a very, very limited set of things that we did before the Zombie Train Incorporated happened, at which point it largely became sort of out of my depth. From an out-of-universe point of view, I have not bothered to figure out what happens with all several hundred of the engines we end up with. Not including diesels. Also not including ones we built. So it sort of leaves me up the creek a little bit, because I would like to come up with a fantastical thing for everything to happen, and next episode is the Battle of Sault Ste. Marie, which is interesting, and I've talked about it a little bit before, but I'm going to have to go back and rewatch that episode, because I don't remember what I said at all. I don't write this stuff down, I come up with it on the spot, and occasionally I have to reference something that I made previously. So this... revisiting topics creates, it makes it interesting for me, and it sort of forces me to have this continuity, and that's interesting. But it does make it a little bit more, it can make it to be more work for me, which isn't bad, but it's the kind of thing where unless I've touched on it before, I'm going to be making up the material on the spot, and I don't really want to go back on something that I don't remember, so generally it'll be very vague. So that's just a little bit of a preface for what I'm about to say about 844 here, which is nonetheless a good engine. And being one of the Northerns and being in a Midwestern location, of course, the first thing we had to do was reconvert it, or deconvert it, I suppose the word would be, from oil burning to coal burning, which they were originally built to burn oil, so it wasn't they were originally built to burn coal, so it wasn't outlandish, it wasn't ridiculously difficult. But it did take a little bit of effort. So after that was done, which it was done, I believe, on location. We didn't, there's not a lot that goes on in Wyoming, so we managed to just use the shops there in Wyoming. That's where they do, yeah. And it had all the tools we needed to get 844 runnable for our purposes, and then of course we fired her up, loaded her up, and she became, because she was in decent shape to run, she became one of the first transcontinental runners. And that's because we sort of sprung for the steam shop first. It was one of the first things on the list. It was easily accessible, by rail of course, and it had plenty of tools, as I said. It's sort of like, here are these things laid out for you. You know, there are some engines that were very easy to get a hand on, that were very easy to, get running, or engines that were running previously is what I mean. Makes things particularly easy. There were some engines that were particularly not easy to get running because either they were in a state of rebuild or in a state of disrepair. Sometimes both. I'm looking at you, 1361. We had to retrieve your boiler from Mount Union. Anyways, she became one of the first transcontinental runners, which was very, very, very important, and she was going to be not one of the first, but we had damaged 4449, and I've talked about the Battle of Portland and things surrounding it a little bit. I've got an episode in a long, long while where I will come around to it again, because TBA asked me about going to California. But needless to say, the engine was damaged. The engine could have been in a better state. And we would have liked that to be one of the first, if not the first, transcontinental runner, because it certainly had the size to do it. But that was not the case. So 844 fulfilled that purpose, as well as... actually, no, because 611 was not in that sort of state to be running. And 611 does not have the size of drive wheel that we really wanted for the speed. You know, I mean, she could go, but I didn't really trust her to do it that well, and her torque would be better used otherwise. So, given that, she would run from someplace eastern, probably, in a lot of cases, Selkirk Yard, because it was in a very good position. Pretty much everything had to use the Selkirk Hurdle to get into New England, and we were based in New England. And head west, first on the water level route, and then on the route, well, on one of the routes that went westward. It took a little while to patch up Morais Pass. Morais Pass was in a sorry state, and a lot of the other routes were damaged prior to the battle for Annex, and that took some time to fix. Now, thankfully, I was going to say the Moffat route, but the Moffat route was out of commission due to, well, some things that Weibold saw when he was there. And not only that, that was damaged by Annex as well, I believe. In any case, it was the more northerly route. I don't know the names of all the transcontinental routes, and that's kind of shameful of me, but it was the route that runs more northerly of that, the route that runs through Salt Lake, that was used for some of the first transcontinental runs. And this was in part because, well, it was one of the only ones there. Sorry, the one that runs not through Salt Lake. It does run through Salt Lake, or at least the one that we were running did, but it runs through Cheyenne. It is the more northerly route. And as I've seen, it's Roland's Pass. As I've pointed out, and I believe I talked about in the Battle for Annex, how this occurred sort of generally out there. Sort of in the middle of nowhere. I can't remember the exact location now. Again, going back to I don't really know. I sort of made things up. But, wow, this is a tight turn if I've ever seen one. What, That must be a bastard to go up. This is I'm looking at the line that runs across the Salt Flats. We used, again, the route slightly more northerly of that. It has the causeway across Salt Lake, but that was not a safe route until after we retook Salt Lake. Before that, they would run through Pocatello, and whatever this route is, through Nampa. That's it, isn't it? Anyways, it was a very roundabout way to get to San Francisco, which was the inevitable goal. But it was sort of a thing where there was a lot of track work going on in this period, and 844 was routed through most of the major transcontinental routes in her time in service being a transcontinental runner. After that, because we moved a lot of the transcontinental runners, once we had diesel power, we moved them over to diesel power, because being able to run pretty much flat out without having to worry about anything at all, that's a highlight of diesels. The steam engines ran more in places where we had to worry about, or, we didn't have to worry about running out of fuel. So the route I was thinking of, this is, it runs out of Cheyenne and actually dodges Salt Lake City, although there were two ways to do it. One of them went through Ogden. The other one went north, and they both met in Pocatello, and carried it up through and into Oregon, and eventually started heading south around, what is this town? Kennewick. And so, and also you can avoid Portland, head through Bend, and head down towards Sacramento, which is where, not Sacramento, towards Sacramento and then inevitably San Francisco. And this was the route that 844 ran originally. It was not an easy route to run, it was kind of out of the way, and it led to a lot of unfortunate stops, and actually was immensely taxing on the engine. We eventually had a handoff at Kennewick. Or, south of Kennewick. Kennewick is the main spot on the map, but we started using basically whatever we could get out of the facilities in Henniston, I believe this is. Because that wasn't a particularly large town, and it could be cleared for our purposes. So, from Selkirk to Henniston, you had 844 in front of the train, and then you would move it over to something else. Something probably smaller. When we had some of the smaller engines, it was less a matter of running that whole transcontinental route at once, and by smaller, I mean something like a Berkshire, or, a mountain type. Because you could terminate the train in Ohio, or, have another changeover in Ohio, which occasionally was done, but the state was not very well held, so we didn't consider it most of the time, although it was always an option. But yes, so typically Selkirk to Kennewick, or Selkirk to whatever the town was. Harriston. I can't actually see it, because on the map it's covered by the railroad track. I'm using Open Railway Map, by the way, to look at all of the major routes. But anyways, yeah, that's... And after that, again, she sort of got moved to being a West Coast engine, primarily. I couldn't tell you when her last run out of Selkirk was, but the route was never majorly tailored back from stopping there. And she ran quite well. no major incidents with 844. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you next week. Trainman out.